polio in 1952, which was the peak year in this country for polio, when there were 60,000 children who contacted polio, and approximately 3,000 of them died. So, anyway, it was just a couple of days past my birthday. It was a bad day to get polio, but it was even worse because my grandfather had just died, and so my family was really upset about a lot of things right then. It was not the easiest day to travel from where you live to where my grandfather's family lived. With a child who was complaining about having headaches, having muscle aches and pains, and just felt really lethargic. By that evening, I was really sick. And the next morning, rather than taking care of all of the family business, we visited a local doctor who gave me a penicillin shot and sent me back to Jackson, which is close to where I live. And I went to the hospital there. They gave me a spinal tap, which was one of the scariest things for me, an 8-year-old. And it was really painful too, but it did show that I had polio. So at that point they sent me to the hospital in Vicksburg, so it was more traveling. We get to Vicksburg where I get another needle. So I was not pleased with that, but I was not concerned about being left in the hospital. I think I was just so ill that I really wasn't worrying about things like that. For the next 2 weeks, I was in an isolation ward. My mother came to the hospital every day during that 2 weeks, and she sat out in the hallway and it's on a chair, straight back wooden chair. Not very comfortable. And I do have a vision of her in that chair. But that's about the only thing I remember about that 2 weeks until we got to the end of it. When one night, I obviously had gotten over the fever and was feeling like maybe I could try to stand up. So I stood up in my bed, which was like a great big baby bed with rails on both sides. And I tried to stand up but couldn't, and I fell. And a nurse rushed in and told me I really needed to stay down and not to try to stand up, not to try to walk. But the next day they got me out of bed and started some therapy with me to try to get me to the point where I could learn to walk again. And it really was literally learning to walk. And I was lucky in very many ways. It was not the worst case of polio that anyone had. I had a classmate who had polio that same summer, and when he came back to school, he had leg braces on both of his legs. So I had crutches. I had a corset that I had to wear to strengthen my back. Crutches I didn't mind so much, but the corset I was really embarrassed about because you couldn't see it, but if you touched me, you could feel it, and then people would make these exclamations like, "What is that?" And so that was kind of embarrassing for me. But anyway, I was in the hospital for about 3 months, and during that time, this is another way I was really lucky. And the way children in America are really lucky, and children who came along at the right time. Because Sister Kenny, who was a nurse from Australia, came to America in the 40s, and she had some methods for dealing with polio that were sort of controversial, but they worked. It involved heat packs to wrap your muscles in, and gentle exercising. Prior to that, they had tried to restrain your limbs, to keep your legs straight in plaster cast or tying you down. And that just sounds really horrible. But I was really lucky. I was sent to the hospital in Vicksburg where they where they received the children from. I assume the whole state of Mississippi or the region, I'm not sure. But it was a large facility for handling polio victims in Mississippi. And having really good medical care makes so much difference. And I think that's something that always puzzled me when I would first see children in India or other countries who were crawling around on their hands and knees or riding in bicycle kind of vehicles. And I think, why didn't they get some care? Because you don't have to grow up crippled just because you've had polio. You might, but a lot of children could be saved from that. But then I realized that, you know, America really is a land where there was march of dimes. I mean, it wasn't all, you know, just, if you had wealthy parents, they could take care of you. March of dimes helped other children too, so I benefited from that. I benefited from having a good program and a fine hospital. So anyway, after 3 months I was released, I came home. For the next half a year, I was at home. I didn't go to school until the second half of the school year. And I went on crutches, I went with ugly shoes, I went with the corset. And I also, another thing I brought from the hospital is that I developed a really deep-seated fear of getting shots. So a couple of years, I think it was a good bit of time had passed, and I had flu or something and had to go see the doctor, and he wanted to give me a penicillin shot, and I just broke out crying in the office. I was almost hysterical, and my mother was really embarrassed at me because I'd always been the kind of kid who would let you do whatever you needed to do. But anyway, I was totally unreasonable about that, and it had to do with having fun. But over the next few years, I got better and better. I continued to have follow-up appointments with a physical therapist in Vicksburg, so we made trips back. At first they were fairly frequent, then they got spread out. But by the time I was in the 5th grade, I was beginning to do normal things like ride a bicycle and go roller skating and things like that. So anyway, that's my story, and if you have any questions, I'll try to answer them. But
Thank you.